Hello, everyone. Welcome to Keeping the Spotlight on Sustainability at Seatrade Cruise Virtual. I'm Jane Madden, Managing Partner, Global Sustainability and Social Impact at Fin Partners, and I'll be moderating the session. First, a few housekeeping notes. This session will be available on the platform after we finished airing. So if you have to leave for any reason, don't worry, you won't have to miss out. And now I would like to introduce our panel. First, Nicolas Dubreuil, Director of Sustainability at Ponant. Next is Arantxa Garcia, Head of Sustainability, Intercruises, Shoreside, and Port Services. And then we have Zachary Kirkpatrick, Corporate Director of Marketing and Public Relations, Alaskan Dream Cruises. And finally, but certainly not least, Joyce Landry, Founder, SustainableShips.com. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Today's traveler is looking for experiences that are sustainable and responsible. And let's be honest, the cruise industry isn't exactly what immediately comes to mind when we talk about sustainable travel. But hopefully we'll be able to share some examples today of what is happening in the sustainability world, those that are taking great actions and being on the forefront, and an understanding of what the challenges are. So Joyce, first, let's start with you to set some context. You told me you've been in cruising since the 70s. In terms of sustainability, how has the industry changed?
I would say a sea change would probably be the correct words to use for that. Dramatic. Anyone who had been on a ship back in the 1970s, there was absolutely no sustainable thought process at all. And we witnessed quite a few things that I think back then were considered okay, and certainly would not be appropriate at all today, as far as the use of trash on board and just the way that the oceans were treated, not just by the cruise lines, but by everyone. I mean, back in the 70s, the ocean was the world's dumping ground. It just was, and we've come a very, very long way. So the cruise industry is at the forefront now. The cruise industry is actually leading the way on ocean-borne vessels to really make a change in that regard. And so they're going to be out front and others will be following.
Great, thanks, Joyce. Nicolas, when we spoke before, you also mentioned that once you thought cruise ships were quote unquote the devil. How did your opinion change? I know you went from a kayak taking people on expeditions now to smaller ships. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yes, because the thing is that I was guide for ski expeditions and kayak expeditions, diving expeditions in North Greenland, and I was living in a very small settlements in Couche-Lorsoak in the Melville Bay, very north of Greenland. And honestly, I mean, the first time I saw a ship, it was 20 years ago, and as Joyce say, it was crazy. I was in my kayak, you know, in Ilulissat, and I saw ships coming. It was for me like a big building. It was only a 100 people ship, so it was a very small ship. But for me, in a kayak, it was crazy, and I feel like it was the devil. And I was very rude. I mean, with them, I said, no way, I will never work for this. It's ugly, and you see and I love what you say, Joyce, about this idea of the smoke of the ship, very romantic and so on. But for me, it was so scary, you know, all the smoke here in Ilulissat, in middle of icebergs. So I was really, I got a very bad opinion. And one year, there is a guy who talked with me. We are discussing, and he said, okay, you are talking a lot about cruise ship, you're badly, but have you been on board? And I said, no, I never been on board. That's right. And it was now 15 years ago, in 2005, I want to see what happens. So I was hired by Ponant as guide on board, it was Le Diamant, the first real expedition ship that they got. And the first step for me was very difficult because I was, you know, coming from living in Greenland to going on a ship, on a luxurious cruise ship. So it was a little bit scary for me. But as soon as we got on the field, all my opinion changed. from one side to another, because I realized something, and that's for me the strongest part of the cruise ship. This is the tool that you got on board the ship. With the ship, you can teach to your passenger. You can explain them. You got these people with you on board, and I know that Zach will also talk about that. But it's crazy because you can do what you want, and suddenly the power is that you will give sense, I mean, to the reason to the trip that they do. And suddenly I realized that you can really change the world. You can change the mind of your passenger with this kind of cruise ship.
Great, thanks, Nicolas.
Discover.
Thanks so much. Zach, do you want to add on to that about the learning experience and teaching about sustainability via cruising?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I have a few thoughts on that. So I'm the marketing director for a small ship cruise line in Alaska, Alaskan Dream Cruises. And just like Nicolas was saying, you know, when I think about the passengers we've had over the last 10 years of operation now, they're coming into Southeast Alaska, and they're really getting what we call it true Alaska with true Alaskans experience. It's not just this kind of theme park Alaska that they're just kind of seeing. They're getting into native villages that have fewer than 400 people. And they're seeing a lifestyle that, while it is domestic travel, if you're in the United States, it's almost like going to a foreign world. It's so different for someone to see these indigenous lifestyles and cultures. And that's a huge learning experience. But I also want to note, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't note that it's certainly because of the price point of some of the small ship cruising and the luxury cruising or the expedition cruising. It's not for everybody, but we've been seeing the large ships too, making a more concerted effort. And I don't just say that, truly a more concerted effort to talk about the culture and to give people authentic experiences. And that's driven by the market too. That's what people want. They want authentic experiences. So sustainability is certainly about, some of the things we talk about, reducing plastics and waste and all these things, but it's also, there's a cultural component, just a sustainable industry. And we're seeing that as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point too. We see this in the bigger world of sustainability, where it's the smaller companies and the more agile and nimble companies are taking the lead. And then over time, we see some of the bigger, multinational corporations learning from those experiences. Arantxa, can you tell us a little bit of what you've seen on the port side and the changes there? And obviously you're dealing with bigger ships as well as smaller ships.
Yes, we do. Honestly, from my perspective, the cruise ship experience does not start and stop only in the ship. It's not only at that space of time when you enter and you go into the ship and then you leave. The whole cruise experience starts when the client actually arrives to the port, whichever the port is. And then when they do the whole experience, and they stop at ports, they do excursions, shore excursions, and they actually end up into another port, and they go back home. So in our perspective from Intercruises, Shoreside, and Port Services, this is actually what we do. We help the cruise lines to bring the clients, and we do all the turnarounds in the ports. We do port services for them, and then we offer them the shore excursions. So we are quite in that side of the shore experience, and we have actually seen a lot of changes in the last years. First of all, the sensitivity and the clients, both the final client and the cruise lines, is changing dramatically year on year. So we are receiving more and more requests and expectations for instance, more sustainable shore excursions, better experiences on the ground, insurance that the way we operate is responsible, and this is something you can see also from the service providers. So the ports are changing dramatically also. They are offering more and more better infrastructure, opportunities for, electric plug-in for the ships, things like that were like unthinkable some years ago, now are available in more and more ports and places. So we've seen a lot of change, and also we see, as I mentioned, with the increase in the demand, we also see a good response from the local communities and from the places where we operate. So when the more responsible we operate, the better, or the more sensitive are our excursions, our services, and the way we operate, the better response is we're getting from ports. This does not mean that there is not some criticism around, because we all know we cannot just look away. There are some criticisms still related to this, but we are seeing a great improvement, a lot of change in this area in the last years.
Great, thanks so much, everybody. That's really been a great way to dive into this discussion. I'd like to go a little bit deeper. When we talk about sustainable travel, it not only includes the environment, but it's also, as we're already hearing, social and economic impact, as well as safety. We've talked a little bit about what your customers and your guests are demanding. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And also, are we seeing differences according to region? How different is Alaska? It's obviously unique, but how different is that than Europe or South America? And do we see different things in more fragile areas, more environmentally or socially fragile areas?
If I could dive in here, that was a lot to pack in.
Yes.
But we have to remember where we are in sort of the pendulum here. I mean, we're at the beginnings. I mean, there has been ecotourism now for about 20 years, but really the Global Sustainable Tourism Council only really was started finished really 2015, created, which then led to the United Nations Sustainable Goals. So, we're really it's a process. It's definitely a process. And I think we're looking at things like being, getting rid of plastics, single-use plastics. That's where we are today. 10 years from now, we're probably going to be looking at being carbon neutral completely, or we'll see the end of fossil fuels. I mean, it's burgeoning. And what's happening, and I think especially with COVID, is that people are looking at their values, and they're buying from their values. And if you look at the Global Sustainable Tourism Council numbers, it has been growing dramatically in interest that the traveling public has had in doing something that is a very nice travel experience, but at the same time is a give back. It's something that they're able to feel really good about. And we only see that increasing. So that's not going to be going back. So that is an increasing area. As a matter of fact, I had one statistic here that I thought I would share, is that 51% of the growth in this market is coming from Europeans, which I don't think is any mistake there. And an incremental growth from 2018 to 2023, it says $338 billion growth in just travel tourism in general globally for tourism that has to do with sustainability. So it's something that it's not just about good for the world, it's truly good for finances and for the economies of the cruise industry and the travel industry in general.
Zach, I thought you had something that you wanted to contribute.
Yeah, I think that, at price point for some people will always be one of the biggest deciding factors when they're looking at an experience. But I do think that there's a trend that more and more people are looking at corporate responsibility of the company they're going with, the background of the company they're going with, the kind of experiences they'll be having. And I think that I am pretty Alaska centric. I haven't been involved in cruising in a lot of other places in the world, but I see heads nodding on the panel to know that that's probably true throughout the world. For us, this idea of, we talk about regenerative tourism in Southeast Alaska. And actually, if you're familiar with Alaska, there are native corporations throughout the state. And we partnered with one of these Alaska Native corporations to hire a person that is specifically, their role is to work with small communities and small villages throughout Alaska, so that they can kind of chart their own course in the cruise industry and the visitor industry. A lot of them say, whoa, you know, at first they might say, oh, these cruise ships, we don't want them in our community. But if they see that those companies are willing to listen and not just impose tourism upon them, but say, no, we want to hold your hand and listen to you, and we want you to tell us, how do you see tourism in your community? First of all, do you want it? And a lot of people now, they're seeing the economic benefit, not only economic benefit, but the ability to share their culture. So they're saying, yeah, actually, we do want some cruise travel. And then we say, okay, what does that look like to you? We don't want to, we're not just coming in to just look at all of you and, you know, watch from the sidelines. We want you to do a dance show, if that's, or an artist market. Bring your native artists down, and we'll give you an audience, and we'll give you a clientele to buy your art. And these are places where they have very few visitors, so it's important to them. And so that position is to be a liaison and to let these new ports of call tell us how they envision the cruise industry, and to do it on their terms. And to us, that's the sustainable approach. That's regenerative tourism. And in fact, we actually, with we have our small ship cruise line, and we have a day boat company that does shore excursions. We recently did this in a town that had never had a large cruise line with one of the large cruise lines this last year. We took a small group from the ship at sea. The big ship didn't come in, they were at sea. We pulled up against their platform, took just, I think, 40 people, and then went out to a community that has never had cruise visitors before like that. And it was a new thing, but it worked well. And the comment cards from the guests were really inspiring. They were like, wow, that is, you know, we do Juneau and Skagway and Ketchikan, the big port calls in Alaska, but to get into that native village was a powerful experience. And so that was a neat thing.
And before we go into the other panels, Zach, you also have the extra, I guess, almost advantage of being a native-owned company, correct?
Yeah, sorry. I've neglected to mention that the owners, the Allen family, are Tlingit, which is an Alaska Native tribe down here. So these are truly our friends and family members that we're working with, which makes the relationship that more intimate. But I think throughout the world, that is, you know, regardless if you're a friend and family member of the people you're visiting with, there's a responsibility for us in the cruise industry to talk to these places. As obviously the pandemic has done its damage, but as cruise comes back and it continues to grow, that just becomes more and more important to listen.
Great, and I love the term regenerative tourism. Generally, you hear that in terms of agriculture, regenerative agriculture. So I like to see that concept is moving to other industries. Arantxa, I keep seeing you shaking your head. Yeah. What would you like to add?
I'm very happy to see. I mean, what Zach has explained is actually like the core of what responsible ways of operating is, and for us being like, you know, a global provider of services, including the Shorex, this is actually the most important thing. So to start with finding the best ways for, you know, engaging with the community, sharing that culture without damaging or without over impacting in those destinations. So I think this is actually something that you can be, you know, can extrapolate it to any destination. Depends, as you were asking of, you know, different destinations or different areas, depending on the place in the world. Actually, the infrastructures are there, better or worse, and there, sometimes, as also Zach was explaining, you have to be creative and find ways of doing this without disturbing a lot the specific area of the community. In my case, what I would like to add is that in order to do this in a global way, it's important to have like certain criteria, so ways of operating. So the core is there, but there needs to be a way of of giving guidance and guidelines. In our case, and actually many of the big cruise lines, we are now working very close together with the GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council that Joyce was mentioning. And because, yeah, we need to have like a common criteria in which we are all, you know, aware of which are those core topics, core issues that we need to look for and take care of, and find ways to implement it. We have, for instance, developed a virtual system that we use in the whole of Intercruises, because we are all around the world, that is actually certified, GSTC certified by a control union. It's a criteria that we have where we check every single shore excursion against this criteria to make sure that we're taking every single of those topics into consideration. It's been, look, it's crazy. I mean, this is quite an innovative thing for us. It's been very difficult because, yeah, implementing a criteria, as you may all know and probably understand, is very challenging. But in the end, we find that it's the only way to really try to provide the same treatment both to the communities but also to the clients. So this, try to be a little bit like, yeah, homogeneous in the way we do things, and being respectful at the same time. So yeah, it's I was just wanted to extend, the core is there, and then we need to find ways, and there are ways out there to make sure that those topics are taken into consideration. So criteria is one of those, and in our case, we've done it with this this online virtual tool that we fulfill every single shore in it, and then we can rate and rank our shorex and the offer. Yeah, but I think this is, it's like an evolution of how to implement those things.
Absolutely. Nicolas, anything that you'd like to add?
Yes. I just want to emphasize what Zach said, because I was so. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm traveling all around the world, and I'm coming from Couche-Lorsois, as I say. And the thing is that really often we are talking about sustainability. We are talking about SCR, or we are reducing the CO2, reducing the CO. I mean, we always have this answer. We answer the technology by another technology. We go from heavy fuel to LNG or whatever. It's good things, of course. It's mandatory, and there is no question about that. But we have also to change our practice. And exactly what Zach say. I remember what happens, because when I start to work with Ponant in my settlements, one day they say to me, "Oh, Nicolas, we are not very happy. There is all the Inuits come to me and say, we are not very happy because you got a big boat and you don't come to our settlements." I say, "Oh, it's not my boat." Unfortunately, it's not my boat, but okay, if you want, we can discuss how you want to do, what do you want to, and we to work, and we start a kind of co-construction. If I explain it well, I mean, it's that we don't come and just say, okay, do the drum dance, for example. And no, we start to construct with them what they want to show to our passenger. And that was just so crazy, because the first time we do that, so we visit the settlements, they have organized everything. That was really, as it is. I mean, in Greenland, it was a mess, but it was so nice and so powerful. And after that, I say, okay, if you want, as exactly what say Zach, come on board. We have a theater, and I give you my passenger for 1.5 hours, and you do what you want, and I will translate and explain. And so all the passengers were very happy to come to the theater, and it's a settlement of 400 inhabitants, and we got I think 350 people on board. So don't say that, because it was scary for the drone. But we got all these people on board. All the settlements was on board. They were all in the theater. And I say, okay, to the passenger, I don't know what they want to do. I mean, they will do, we will see. And the curtain opened. And I mean, all the passengers, they were waiting for the drum dance. And the curtain opened. And that was 2 young girls. And they dance on the Britney Spears song. And that was, I mean, just the passenger, they were just like this. And after that, they got other show, of course. But I explained something very strong, is that, these people, what they want to show you with that, is that they want to show you that they understand your culture and they know you, but you don't know them. And for me, that just ring a bell as exactly the same experience that Zach say. And suddenly we change our practice. And now when we do a cruise somewhere, we go for scouting years before, discussing with people, what do you want to do? how do you want to manage? Do you want to come on board or not? Do you want to do things to show our passenger? And there is something economically very important, is that what Zach says that also is, what do you want to sell? I mean, do you have something to sell to the passenger? Do you want to offer? And that's, you know, for example, in Greenland, what is very important is the seal skin. And that's a very sensitive subject, because they have been banned, I mean, from the European community, because they kill seal. But if you don't kill seal in Greenland, you die. I mean, there's not other thing to eat. So what they do with the seal skin, and we have to help them to explain that the seal skin is sustainable, and in Greenland, I mean, and they can sell it, and we have to teach to the passenger. So all these things, all the way of changing our practice, it's something really, really good.
Such a great example. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I could just quickly add, the correct kind of tourism can actually be beneficial to destinations. And one really good example of that is the Galapagos. The Ecuadorian government has been encouraged to preserve those islands through the tourism and through the dollars that come through tourism. So it's been set up so that it's very, very limited, the number of people. It's done in a way that you don't see any other ships when you're there. I mean, it's done in a very, very subtle way so that you can see and be and still experience that amazing destination. But without tourism, I don't even know what would happen to them. They would have laid to waste. I'm sure the animals wouldn't even be there by now.
A great example, Joyce. And I really like, Nicolas, this idea of co-creation, because you mentioned the seal skins, but it's a fine line, right? That we travel to learn, but we have to be careful not to impose on the communities where we are learning, and that these local communities should have a voice in how people are visiting them, so that we're avoiding some type of, I don't know if it's monetary or cultural imperialism, or even this horrible idea of almost poverty tourism, that you want to see something that's different. And that only works if you really truly understand the community and that they're telling their story to you the way they want to tell that story. Arantxa, did you have something to add?
No. I mean, I totally agree with what they said. I keep saying that this is all super positive, but it needs to have a framework. What in my experience is super important that we don't forget the framework, because sometimes then, as also Joyce was mentioning, you can, depending on the balance, you can go over tourism, or or go under. So a framework and a criteria, and having things a little bit under measurement, so to speak, it's also super important.
Absolutely, and that's where I was going to go next, based on your previous comments. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the GSDC certification. But first, let me ask, do any of your companies have their own sustainability goals?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes, we've chosen, I believe, 10 of the UN sustainability goals that we've decided to focus on in our own company. So it has to do with everything from purchasing to how we travel, when we travel again, if we travel again, I'm sure we will, and just the goods and services that we have. As I just had lunch a few minutes ago in our office with our cutlery that we now have in the office that we take care of, that we don't throw anything away here. So these are the small things that we can do in our office, but we also encourage everyone to be a part of some environmental organization, get out there and help to clean up the water. We have actually an ocean cleanup coming up on Virginia Key in about 2 weeks. So, we try to have everyone just participate, do something, and put kind of your, put yourself on the line here and help.
Absolutely.
One example I can give of this, and yes, we have our sustainability goals, and we're working with the global sustainability tourism and working towards that as well. But one specific example I can give is we were doing a shore excursion that was kind of watching the humpback whales and a dinner cruise, and we did this for years until it struck us, we're doing this dinner cruise, and the buffet, or the entree was this hunk of beef and just all these other things, and we thought we live here in Alaska and there's all these food companies and we're passing these small fishing boats. And why are we eating this big chunk of beef as an Alaskan company here with this food production going around? So we started this whole big program of fresh Alaska cuisine is the name of the game. And we got it from, that local fisherman that we just passed, who is a small family business. He might have been doing it for generations. We're buying the king salmon, through the processor. It could have been from him. And then there's a company that's harvesting kelp locally. And that's going to be some of the green, or these kelp pickles with smoked salmon and halibut. And so to us, the food is a huge part of the sustainability, keeping the regional. It's kind of like farm to table, but here it's ocean to table. And so we started to think a lot about the purchasing that we were doing, and is that money staying right here and benefiting the region?
Bless you for doing that. I was in Alaska last year with a charter, and we wanted to do a salmon bake out on deck, and we were told that they don't purchase salmon locally in any of the places there. So it was a devastating thought. Here we are in Alaska, we couldn't have local salmon. We had to get off the ship to do it. So you're leading that way. Please get everyone else to do the same. I know that there are a lot of ships that are starting to look at sustainably caught fish and sustainably farmed fish, but also locally provided fish is next on the list. And I think that that's a big hurdle for the cruise lines still to pass.
And if we want to make a good name for the cruise industry as a whole, which I think is getting better, but imagine, like Nicolas was saying, you see a lot of people see these huge floating cities come by and they're like, oh, I don't know about that. But imagine the change if people see that and they think, look at all the salmon that ship is buying from us. And we're getting a huge economic benefit for so many of our small companies because they're here.
Absolutely.
And that goes, that pertains to a lot of different things.
Yeah, I totally recall on that. And this is something we do have, of course, a sustainability strategy, and it's actually part of a wider strategy within the TUI group. But we've had a strategy for over 20 years now. But this local procurement and check-in communities, etc., is so core that, again, this is one of the things we check whenever we do whenever we put all these excursions through our system, local owned and restaurants or locally produced food. And not only that, for instance, if we provide a gift to the client, or if we do something related to show the culture of the things, we make sure that it's locally produced, locally made. It has a relation with the place they're visiting or the area or whatsoever. And actually clients really love it. They really love when you tell the stories to them. It's actually having the sustainability strategy makes sense. And if you are able to tell it to the clients and they are able to understand why you do the things you do. I mean, the moment you just tell them, okay, we're going to eat here today, and this is a locally owned restaurant, and the families from the little village over there, and they have 3 people employed that also belong to the village, etc. And you're going to try the typical dish here with the food, and people just love it. It's just, it's always incremental. It's always a positive experience, and it's always beneficial. So yeah, I think having a sustainability strategy or sustainability goals is now is something that it's like a little bit like a must. But it's also so linked to actually the operations and the ways of working and the experience that the client is going to receive, that it's just an enhancer of the positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Arantxa, I think you hit on something else. Another question I had. How do you communicate? We're talking on board, some ways that you're practicing and also communicating with your guests. But before a guest gets on board, how are you communicating what you're doing in sustainability? Certainly a certification and reports are one way, but can you talk a little bit more about how you're doing that?
Yeah, okay. We work very close with our clients, of course, because to be honest, I mean, we just serve those cruise lines in in land, in port, etc. So what we really have is really good and very strong alliances with our clients, and we work together with them. We explain them our strategy. We work together. We align our strategies, and they also tell us what their strategy is and what they want to talk to their clients about, because we don't contact the guests until they just arrive on land, and we just take them to the experience or whatsoever. So the real ways of working with them is first of all always through the cruise line, and it's the cruise line the ones that are going to be offering the clients those experiences and explaining them why. So that's, again, I'm sorry to be so insistent, but having a framework and a criteria and actually certification, it makes things so much easier, because the cruise line can be, can rest assured that what you are offering to them has been verified. So what they are telling their guests, which in the end is all of us, it's everybody's guests in the end, but what they're telling is something that has been checked and is reliable, and they can provide the proper experience to them. So this piece of communication is super important, and then of course, yes, as you say, reporting and participating in things. And the only opportunity we actually have of having this direct contact with guests is when they are with us. So we try to make sure we do have even training for our guides. So we make sure that the moment they have the experience with us, there is also this communication going on, that the guides are explaining the guests exactly what's going on and what things are we providing them with, or explaining them the experience, and also the sustainability items related to it, and yeah, so that will close the loop a little bit.
No, we didn't
Great,
mention the GSTC, by the way, is very strict, and I really, any of the tour operators who go by those guidelines have made a huge investment. They've made an investment in making sure that their vehicles are sustainable, that the uniforms that they purchase are sustainable, that every single thing that they do, it's really, really a very, very rigid guideline. So it costs money to do that. So they're making an investment in this way, and and that's something I think we can all appreciate, that it costs in order to do this, but the results in the end, will pay for themselves.
Right, and there are multiple stakeholders. We've been talking about your guests, but it's also customers in Arantxa's case, but there's also governments looking at you, multiple governments, depending upon where you operate. Zach, I know that this is your day job, right? Is communicating and marketing. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Alaskan Dream Cruises is doing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your question was about the pre-efforts before they step on board, and just making sure, the internet is such a huge tool for guests finding us these days. So making sure that there's a sustainability link on your website. And we, and a lot of what I try to do here with the company is to do some visual storytelling. So having, especially, part of the owner's family who are, as said before, Alaska Native and Tlingit, be able to tell the story of our company. And then back to the food that I talked about, we did a video segment about local fishermen and how we purchase that food. And so making sure you're communicating through those digital channels, and then making sure that the reservation specialists that are talking directly to the guests are aware of the things you do corporately, and do trainings with them, and all of those efforts, email campaigns to make sure we tell the story.
Great, thanks. Nicolas, anything to add to the standards or communications conversation?
Yeah, I'd love to give you lots of nice ideas, but to be really honest, we are not very good on that. I mean, we are not very good on communication. We do lots of things, but I mean, maybe it's typically French. I mean, we do lots of things, but we don't really talk of that very well, and that's a pity, because what I realized when I came on board the ships is that sometimes the passenger they are better than us. I mean, they are watching us a lot. I mean, lots of time I got some people who say to me, you're working for a cruise ship company, but they are doing crazy things, and they have bad approach for the whales, for the polar bear. but we cannot. I mean, even we have very strict, and I fully agree with Arantxa that we need framework, we need guidelines, we need very strict guidelines. We have that, but the best guideline, this is our customers, our passengers. I mean, if you approach well badly, too close or too fast, and they will come to the bridge and they will say to the captain or to the expedition leader, immediately, that's not good. And they will have an opinion. So that's very good. I mean, I think that we are very good on board. I mean, we are very good on board. I mean, all the education part, explaining to the passenger, coming with them, teaching them how to behave with all the nature, with you know, when we go in the Arctic and Antarctic, and especially in the Antarctic where the nature is very fragile. I mean, we have a very good opportunities with that. We were working with IATO, International Association of Antarctic Tour Operator, and we have very strict guidelines. We are very good on the field, but to be honest, I mean, this is a weak point for us. We are not very good on communication before, I mean, to explain to the passenger, but I think that because we are well known on expedition, the people who come on board, our passenger, they are all already trained to that. I mean, they don't take, I mean, if I remember, it was, I think, I don't know exactly, but maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I got a passenger who came to me with you know, the straw, and he said, "What is that, Nicolas? You are talking to us about ecology and how and you got this on board. Shame on you." Ooh. And we changed that immediately. And that's the good things is that our passenger push the company to change, and that's a very good thing.
You know, Nicolas, I don't think that you're alone regarding the communication and lack of.
Thank you.
No, really, I had a conversation with the chief marketing officer earlier this year from a major cruise line. And I had just come back from a hard hat tour of their new vessel. And I said, "Oh, you're doing this, you're doing that, sustainable, you're doing that. Why aren't you talking about it? Why aren't we hearing about this?" And he said the most interesting thing. He said, "No matter what we do, no matter what we say, we're going to be criticized for what we're not doing, that we're not doing enough." He said, "So we have a company dictate not to actually talk about this except in very broad terms and, you know, put our sustainability document out there, but not to actually market to it." He said, "We can't do it, but you can." And so that was actually one of the reasons why we started our Sustainable Ships platform and our live cast, because we're having guests on the program all the time from the cruise lines talking about it, but they just don't want to do it publicly, I guess, because of the fear of not doing enough.
Yeah, yeah. But I do love your transparency, Nicolas, because that's the first step. And Joyce, I do hear, we see that in other industries, but being transparent and talking about, you know, I think being, as I always call, honest and modest. We know we have a lot to go, but this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to get there. But Nicolas, you also brought up the passenger. I want to just pivot a little bit from what you are doing with your companies to what is the expectation, if you have any, of your passengers and how they should behave responsibly and sustainably.
You mean, sorry, I don't understand very well your question. You mean how we act with our passenger, or what they expect?
What if you do expect, or just pivot a little bit to the idea of a responsible traveler and what we should be expecting from travelers in terms of their own actions when they are traveling. So if you have specific examples on board or any thoughts on what we should be asking travelers. Joyce had mentioned the Galapagos, for example. I know from my own experience that you are expected to act in a certain way when you go on board. And I know that I believe it's Palau has asked the travelers going there to sign a document saying they will be a sustainable and responsible traveler. I just wonder if that is going to take hold in this industry, because we're asking our customer to do something that other industries may not ask them to do.
The thing is that, and I come back on a little bit on communication, because I'm fighting a lot, because of course you want to go to Greenland or to Svalbard, for example, and of course the goal to go to Svalbard is to see polar bear, and we will put some picture of the polar bear, just the head of the polar bear. on our communication. It's very bad. It's very bad communication, because if you do that, the passenger, they will expect to come so close to the polar bear. And I mean, it's not obviously something that you want to do, but we are also here to teach them that, I mean, they won't see the polar bear so close. I mean, they have to go to the zoo if they want to see the polar bear so close. I mean, we bring them in the place where the polar bear live. And so we will see their behavior. So they will have to have some binoculars on board. And you know, this small tool, the binocular, that changed everything for the passenger. Suddenly, when they realize that they will have to have binoculars to see the polar bear or the whales and so on, that will change also their behavior. And they will, when we go to Antarctica, for example, we have very strict rules. And I realized also that when I was leading, you know, 8 people to go to the North Pole by ski, I mean, it's very tricky when you are alone and to manage all these people. You have to manage the food, the tent, the safety, and so on. So it's really tricky. When you are on board a ship, and that's what I discovered, and as Joyce say, it's not explained. I mean, that you have, I don't know you, but I mean, it's almost the same. I mean, we have 200 passengers, we have 140 crew to help them, to secure them, to teach them, and to be with them. So we are protecting them, and we are protecting also the environment, and we are here to teach them how to behave. And for example, with IATO, with IECO, with all this association, we have rules. I mean, it's forbidden to go close to the penguins from 5 meters. So you have to stay away from 5 meters. And obviously, I mean, with this problem now that we got with this virus, it's almost more than this, and we have to be there to check that all the passenger, absolutely all the passenger, respect that, and that, I mean, the passenger, they sign something. And that happens to me, for example. We have, it was a long time ago, I got one passenger who was just crossing in the middle of a rookery. And I yelled at him and I said, no way to go there, come back. And he said, I do what I want. So I have to go myself in the middle of the rookery to catch him, to bring him back. I bring him on board, and I bring him directly to the captain. And the captain said, okay, sir, it's forbidden now for you to disembark. It's forbidden, you stay on board. And he complained, of course. He wrote a letter to my CEO and he said, it's unacceptable, I want to be refunded and so on and blah, blah. But I mean, we are here, we are the guard of all the ecosystem, of the behavior with the people also, and when our passengers go on a place, when they go to in Greenland, for example, where they are doing seal hunting, I mean, we are here to teach them that it's for their life, that they have to do that, and we don't have these people who have bad behavior and criticizing people who are hunting seals on the field. I mean, they understand, and so all these rules, I mean, they are very strict. And sometimes as expedition leader, I was expedition leader for 10, 15 years. It's sometimes difficult, but you have to fight and you have to stay. I mean, stay on the line and always fighting to respect and to push the passenger away if they are not on the line and so on.
Yeah, I, for one, I'm glad to see what appears to be the end of the dolphin encounters, right? And a lot of the other tiger encounters and places where they were really more, it was like an abusive type of a relationship, and the tourists didn't even realize that. They didn't realize that these were captive animals. So I'm happy to hear that there are cruise lines that are actually banning those tours, you know, from their tour programs going forward. So I think that's a wonderful step forward.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, and I feel that we can't have a conversation about sustainability without really talking about climate change. So I'm going to talk, really looking, well, when cruising comes back, when the travel industry comes back, and looking at how you're preparing for the future. How are your companies dealing with things like rising of sea levels, extreme weather, and unpredictable weather? It's been a record year for hurricanes. So in the United States, so those of you working, in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Caribbean, it's has to be really, really trying if you were to be cruising now. But certainly, we're going to see more and more of this. Does anybody want to jump in with some examples of how you're preparing for that?
Yes, if you don't mind, very quick example, because what you say, And that goes also with communication, because we operate a lot in the Arctic and Antarctic, and it's amazing, and I'm sure that Zach will also talk about that. But it's amazing that how the things change, how fast the ice disappeared. But you see, just when I said that, the ice disappeared. It's more complicated than this, in fact. And because the ice is, it's completely, the sea ice, I mean, is heterogeneous. So that means that there is a piece of flow of sea ice that breaks and go everywhere. So now, it's not what you read on the media. On the media, they will say, oh, now you can go from the Atlantic to the Pacific very easily. And it's exactly the opposite. Now you have ice everywhere, and the navigation is much more dangerous. And that's what will happen. So we decide to build a ship stronger for the ice and to be safe and so on. And now we have a problem of communication, because this ship is stronger on the ice. So people say, oh, you will break the ice. No, I mean, we have to be stronger, but it's not obviously to break the ice intentionally, but we have to be stronger on that. So we have to adapt, and we have to adapt. Of course, as I say, we can, for some answer, we can answer by the technology, but we have to change also our practice and change our itineraries and way of working.
Joyce, I know this is a concern of yours. Do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. You know, I have a statistic here also that I would like to share, which is not a really nice one, and it's really why we have to do this. You know, it's that the amount of kilotons of sulfur oxide that is expelled every year, you know, from cruise ships, far exceeds the number of cars that are on the planet. Actually, wow. I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to take specifically the Mediterranean. In the Mediterranean season, 62 kilotons was emitted, you know, through sulfur oxide through cruise ships, and 260 million vehicles only emitted 3.2 kilotons in that same area. So it's a problem that we have to address. And I know that the cruise lines are doing a really good job, particularly the larger cruise lines that are building those ships that will be able to handle alternative fuels. And there are a lot of alternative fuels. It's just not just LNG. There's a lot of other fuels that are being investigated right now. We can't not do this. I mean, this is not an option. You know, the planet is heating up quickly. We're all seeing it. I live at ground zero. I live in Miami, which is supposed to child for sea level rise everywhere. I mean, it rains here and we can't go anywhere already. You know, so we see it. We're a part of it. We are. I go to a lot of climate conferences to try to understand more of it myself. But as an industry, I mean, it's not an option to go backwards. It's just not. And I know you're probably going to talk about COVID too. I mean, we can't let COVID stop the forward movement of sustainability. And while it would be compelling to put our focus on COVID safety right now over sustainability, it has to be done together simultaneously, because if you can slow it down a little bit, but we can't stop it. It's the horse is out of the barn, so to speak, and it's up to us to be responsible and to support a responsible industry that is doing something about this.
Absolutely, because you hit upon my last question, which is, will sustainability be the savior of the cruise industry? Can it be? And it sounds like what you're saying, Joyce, is it has to be.
Mm-hmm. It has to be. And yes, because the cruise industry, I'm going to put it this way, the small industry really, you can kind of set your own way and do your own things and do things in a very different, sustainable way. The large ships have a different platform to work on. So they are looking at all of the sustainability from everything that they're doing. They may not be able to affect the ports in a way that they can start getting local items on board or do nice small excursions where, you know, it's just the numbers just don't account for that. But economically, they have to run a larger ship in order to be able to perform. But the ships can be clean. They can still move passengers in a very clean way, and they can still require that the passengers step up also. I mean, you mentioned what can a passenger do? Something as simple as buying a sunscreen that's not going to ruin the environment. You know, buying something that is water soluble very easy thing to do. So we can ask passengers to contribute, to be a part of this, to not bring on plastic bottles onto the ship, to not bring on things that are disposable. So I think that there is a way that we can work together and grow together, you know, both as human beings and as cruise passengers. I mean, we're evolving, I would hope.
Zach, anything from your point of view you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think that Joyce has been a really good spokesperson the last few minutes on this topic, but I think that sometimes it can be overwhelming. You know, when guests are aboard our ships, even small ships, the elephant in the room when you're talking about sustainability or climate change is that we're all out burning fossil fuels. It's, you know, so we can be up in a glacial fjord and we're talking about the latest, and that's one thing I was going to say. We make sure our naturalists have the most up-to-date scientific studies, and that they have that information, but they also know how to talk about it in a way that is disarming. Some people, no matter what, they're gonna, you know, there'll be arguments, but they know how to talk about it and not engage in any. We say there's no point in engaging in any sort of fight over this with a guest. But what I was going to say is, I think we need to not overlook the power of making small changes that will add up. Because if you look at sustainability, it can be overwhelming to try to like, well, how are we going to get past this big hurdle but it's going to take a bunch of small changes. So when we add, you know, one of our vessels and one of our small day lodges has solar panels, and that is just such a tiny little minor blip on the radar in the scheme of the world. But if everyone starts doing this kind of thing, that's what we need. So we need to not overlook the small changes that we all make that then can add up.
And I think we can teach also. I really do. The Mayan Peninsula up until very recently had no recycling. And yet there were thousands of cruise passengers going there every year. You know, we can teach people how to behave differently, and we can, you know, only take things off the ship that we know that are recyclable and not drop things where they can't be taken care of properly.
Arantxa, anything else to add? I'll give you the last word.
Well, we are nearly like out of time, but I would say you ask if sustainability is going to save the cruise industry. I would say sustainability is the only option for the cruise industry, to be honest. I mean, maybe not today, maybe we're not going to find all the solutions today or tomorrow, but as Zach says, and also Joyce, this is like an ongoing work. Small, medium, and large initiatives are all adding up, and the only way to save or to survive in this industry, and actually in tourism overall, is to be sustainable, is to make sure that,
I think that is a great note, that sustainability is the only option, a great message to end on. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for attending, keeping the spotlight on sustainability. And a special thank you to all of you. What a great conversation.
Thank you, Jane.
Enjoy the rest of Seatrade Cruise Virtual.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.